While I was away on a business trip, my parents sold my dream home to pay for my brother's luxury vacation. When I got back, my dad smirked and said, "Your house paid for their fun." I just smiled. "What's so funny?" he barked. I said, "The house you sold was." Video starts with a slightly melancholic, reflective shot, maybe of a house or a garden, then transitions to a direct address to the camera, with a serious but determined expression. You know, sometimes in life, you make a decision, a seemingly small one, that explodes and shatters everything you thought you knew about your family. For me, it was handing over a key, and that one innocent act triggered a betrayal so profound, it cost my parents and my brother their entire inheritance. My name's Garrett Miller, and at 34, I've built a life for myself that I'm incredibly proud of. I'm an international marketing consultant, and I've been independent since I was 18, leaving my middle-class home in Pasadena to forge my own path. I'm not one to look back, but to truly understand what happened, you need to know about my family. A family where love always felt tilted. My parents, Robert and Linda, were ordinary people. Dad worked at a bank, Mom was a freelance accountant. They had the suburban dream. Small house, white picket fence, minivan. But behind that picture-perfect facade, things were anything but stable, especially when it came to me and my younger brother, Brian. He's 4 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, he was the golden boy. Brian was, well, he was lazy. He couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months. But my parents? They always sheltered him, always made excuses. "Brian's still finding his way," my mom would say, even after he quit his 5th job because his boss didn't understand him. Meanwhile, I was working 3 jobs just to get through college, waiting tables, delivering packages, an office assistant, all to graduate debt-free. And I didn't resent it because I believed in hard work. There was one person who truly believed in me, though, my grandfather, Norman. He was my rock. A tough construction worker with calloused hands, but the warmest heart. He'd sit with me on the porch, telling stories, sharing his wisdom. "Your strength is your true asset, Garrett," he'd say, his voice deep and steady. "Money, houses, cars, they're just tools. But your will? That's something no one can take away." Those words etched themselves into my mind, a guiding flame through all those exhausting years. When he passed, I was just 18. He left me a trust fund, money I could only access partially at 25 if I proved myself worthy. And I did. 7 years of relentless grind later, I used part of that trust to make a down payment on an old craftsman house in Pasadena. It wasn't flashy, no mansion, but to me, it was everything. A single-story wooden home with a wide porch, stained glass windows, a small backyard garden. It was old, it needed work, but I adored every chipped brick, every creak in the hardwood floors. I spent months fixing it up myself, sanding, repainting. I even planted a rose garden in the back, just like my grandmother had. Every time I stood there, breathing in that sweet scent, I felt her smiling at me. But my parents and Brian? They just didn't get it. To them, it was just an old pile of wood. The kitchen's outdated. The walls are peeling. "It's a waste of money to fix," my mom once sneered when I invited them for dinner. Brian was worse. He scoffed, called it a chicken coop, said I should have bought a modern downtown apartment. I just smiled because I knew they'd never understand. That house wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of every struggle, every sleepless night, every time I pushed myself to be stronger. The difference between Brian and me wasn't just personality, it was how our parents treated us. I scratched and clawed for every penny. Brian was handed everything. A new car? Parents bought it. Pocket money? Mom slipped it into his hand weakly. Credit card debt? Dad paid it off. I wasn't jealous, but the unfairness stung. I'd done everything right, built my own life. Yet, every time I went home, I'd hear my mom gush about Brian's new opportunities, or my dad talk about how Brian was about to do something big. Brian's big moment never came. I remember one dinner, right after I'd been promoted at my firm. Brian, as usual, was complaining about getting fired again. "My boss didn't know how to use me," he grumbled, glaring at me over a beer. "Not everyone's as lucky as you, Garrett, always having everything handed to you." Lucky me? The one who worked himself to exhaustion? I just ate in silence. Arguing with them was pointless. Then, a huge opportunity landed, a 6-week international consulting project in Europe. London, Frankfurt. It was a career game changer. I was thrilled, but also anxious. 6 weeks was a long time, and I didn't want my house sitting empty. So, I asked my parents to look after it. Just stop by, check the locks, water the rose garden. A small task, right? But as I handed the house key to my father, a strange, cold dread crept over me, like I was entrusting a piece of my soul to someone who didn't truly value it. The last dinner before my flight was at my parents' place. I walked in, trying to be lighthearted, but the familiar atmosphere immediately settled around me. Mom bustling, Dad watching football, and Brian, sprawled on the sofa, phone in hand, complaining about his boss. Work sucks. Pointless tasks. I can't waste my youth at that company. I resisted asking what these pointless tasks were. Garrett, tell me about your Europe trip, Mom said, but I knew it was just courtesy. I started talking about the project, a massive international marketing campaign. It was a chance for a promotion, a chance to prove all my hard work had paid off. But even as I spoke, Mom's eyes kept drifting to Brian, as if he was the one who needed attention. Brian's considering a new job, she interrupted, her voice brimming with excitement. A tech startup. Very promising. I paused. Brian, who couldn't keep a job for 6 months, had a promising opportunity. I looked at him, hoping for some enthusiasm, but he just shrugged, eyes glued to his phone. Maybe, he mumbled. But it's stressful. I need a break first. A break? He'd been on a break his entire life. My dad, usually quiet at these dinners, then spoke up. Garrett, you're going away for so long. What about your house? I seized the chance. Can you and Mom look after it? Just check the doors, water the plants. I'll leave the key. I pulled it from my pocket and placed it on the table. Dad nodded, but his eyes were distant. All right, he said, turning back to the TV. Mom patted Brian's shoulder. My boy needs to relax. Work's so stressful, isn't it? My chest burned. Stressful? Brian didn't know stress. He lived off their money. I'd paid for everything myself, from college to every single brick in my craftsman house. But I said nothing. I'd learned arguing was useless. I thanked Mom, handed the key to Dad again, and left. Say hi to Brian for me. When he looks up from his phone, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Brian just glared. The next day, on the plane to London, I looked out the window, thinking about my house, picturing the rose garden glowing under the California sun. Everything will be fine, I told myself. But a small voice whispered, you just made a mistake. London hit me like a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, late-night meetings, endless presentations. I loved the challenge. Each night, back at the hotel, I'd dream of returning home, sitting on my porch, gazing at my garden. Then, about 3 weeks in, Brian sent me an Instagram link. Not a text, not a call, just a link. I opened it. Photos of him in the Maldives. White sandy beaches, crystal clear infinity pools, a luxurious bungalow. Brian, in a white linen shirt, grinning next to a girl I'd never seen. The caption, Paradise Found. Need more days like this. I sat in my cold London hotel room, staring at my phone, feeling a punch to the gut. The Maldives? Where did Brian get the money? He'd just lost his job, had piles of credit card debt. My parents weren't rich enough for that. I texted him. No reply. I called Mom, then Dad. Both went to voicemail. Unease settled in, thick and heavy. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he borrowed money, won the lottery. But something felt wrong. The image of Brian in the Maldives haunted me. I started checking his Instagram obsessively. Each new post was a fresh stab, seafood dinners on the beach, expensive cocktails, a smug grin on a yacht. I just couldn't understand. My parents' responses grew stranger. Everything's fine, Garrett, Mom said, her voice strained, like she was hiding something. Dad was even briefer, busy. Talk later. I tried to believe everything was okay, that I was imagining things. But every night, lying in my hotel bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind my back. 6 weeks flew by. My project was a massive success, promising a higher position when I returned. But that joy couldn't dispel the dread. Brian's photos, my parents' evasiveness, pieces of a dark puzzle I couldn't yet see. All I wanted was to go home, sit on my porch, and look at my rose garden. The plane landed in LA. I took a deep breath, pushing away the negative thoughts. Everything will be fine, I told myself, though the voice wasn't convincing. On the way to my parents' house to get my key, I checked Brian's Instagram one last time. His latest post made my blood run cold, a selfie of him in front of a shiny new SUV. Welcome to the new ride. My heart pounded. Brian had no money for a car. Where did this come from? As the taxi pulled up to my parents' house, I saw it, a brand new sedan, gleaming in the sun. Not Brian's SUV, but another expensive car. I stepped out, gripping my phone, a boulder pressing on my chest. My father appeared at the door, wearing a new shirt, his eyes cold. Come in, Garrett, he said, his voice low, devoid of warmth. We need to talk. I stepped inside. The air was thick, like the calm before a storm. My mother sat at the dining table, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. Brian wasn't there, but his presence hung heavy. I set my suitcase down, trying to keep my voice steady. Where's my house key, Dad? I asked. The look in their eyes told me the answer wouldn't be simple. Mom looked up, her lips pressed tight. Her voice trembled. Garrett, your house. We sold it. The world stopped. My ears rang. Sold? I repeated, my voice a whisper. Sold my house? What do you mean? Mom looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Dad crossed his arms, his voice firm. We needed the money, Garrett. Brian needed a fresh start. He deserved to enjoy himself a little. And I needed a new car. I stared at my father, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. My house, I said, my voice shaking with raw anger. I spent my whole life buying it. Every dollar, every hour of work, every callus on my hands from fixing it up. You sold it to buy a car for you and to pay for Brian's Maldives trip. I was shouting now. Dad just shrugged. You're always fine, Garrett, he said, as if it were obvious. You have a good job. You have money. Brian doesn't. He needs us. My blood boiled. Brian's 30 years old. He can't hold a job for more than 6 months, and you still coddle him like a child. I turned to Mom, desperate for some remorse, but she just pressed her lips together. You don't understand, Garrett. Brian was stressed. He needed a vacation to recharge. A vacation? I laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. A vacation in the Maldives, 5-star resort, with his girlfriend and friends? And you sold my house to pay for that and to buy new cars. I stepped forward, grabbing my mother's hand, searching for a glimmer of hope, some sign this was a misunderstanding. But her eyes told me everything, the cold, undeniable truth. My craftsman house, where I'd poured my sweat and tears, where I'd planted roses for my grandmother, now belonged to someone else. My father opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of crumpled bills, and tossed them on the table. This is what's left after we sold the house. I nearly lost it. I stormed out, leaving the key, the money, everything. I took a taxi to my house, or rather, what used to be my house. As the taxi stopped, my heart felt crushed. The stained glass windows were still there, but the curtains were different. My rose garden looked tampered with. I stepped out, stood at the gate, and saw them. An elderly couple, watering plants. The woman looked up, smiling. Hello, she said, friendly. Can I help you? My throat was dry. This was my house, I choked out. The man stopped watering. Your house? Are you Garrett? We bought this house a month ago from your parents. They said you'd moved abroad to live. I staggered back. They didn't just sell it. They lied. Fabricated a whole story. Back in the taxi, reeling, I called David, my best friend from college, now a junior lawyer. David, I need to see you right now, I said, my voice raw. At a coffee shop, I poured out the whole story. Brian's trip, the new cars, the house, every word a fresh cut. David listened, brows furrowed. Garrett, he finally said, his voice low but steady. Your house, it's not just personal property, is it? You used part of your grandfather's trust fund to buy it, right? A spark of light in the darkness. Yes, Grandpa Norman's trust fund. I used part of it for the down payment, but it was still tied to the trust. I was the primary trustee until I turned 35. David's eyes lit up. If your parents sold the house without your consent, that could be illegal. But the trust, you need to meet with the lawyer handling it, Mr. Harrison. He's experienced, fair. I vaguely recall conversations with Grandpa about a protective clause. Anyone who intentionally misappropriated trust assets would forfeit their inheritance. Do you think I have a chance? I asked, trembling. David gripped my shoulder. Go see Mr. Harrison. Gather every document, every piece of evidence. I'm certain you have a strong case. I left, my mind a whirlwind, but with a flicker of hope. I hadn't just lost my house. I'd lost my sense of security, my trust in my family. But if David was right, if I could prove they'd gone too far, I could reclaim what was mine. My father's cold face, my mother's evasive eyes, Brian's smug Instagram smile flashed in my mind. I clenched my fists. They thought they could take everything and walk away. They were wrong. I would uncover the truth. And I would make them pay. I immediately called Mr. Harrison. His voice, deep and calm, was just as I remembered. Garrett, are you okay? He asked. No, I replied, my voice hoarse. I need your help. Something big has happened. We met at his office, a quiet place with polished oak and the scent of old paper. He stood, his white hair and round glasses, making him look like a character from a classic novel. Sit down, Garrett. Tell me everything. I took a deep breath and recounted it all. The Europe trip, Brian's Maldives photos, the new cars, the biggest shock. They'd sold my craftsman house without my consent. They said they needed the money for Brian, for his fresh start. But that was my house, Mr. Harrison. I used money from Grandpa's trust. How could they sell it? He listened, chin in hand, eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, then walked to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. Norman Miller Trust. Garrett, he said, his voice low but weighty, that house isn't just your personal property. It belongs to the trust, and you are the sole trustee until you turn 35. If your parents sold it without your permission, that's a serious matter. My heart hammered. How serious, Mr. Harrison? I whispered. He opened the folder, pointing to a highlighted paragraph. Let me explain. When you turn 35, the trust assets are distributed. Your parents, Robert and Linda, each receive $500,000. Your brother, Brian, also gets $500,000. You, Garrett, receive $1 million. You have full access to your million before 35, as you did for the house. But your parents and brother can only receive their shares if they comply with the trust's terms. I nodded, trying to process it. And if they don't comply? I asked, sensing the answer was about to change everything. Mr. Harrison looked me dead in the eye, his gaze sharp. There's a very clear clause, Garrett. Any beneficiary who forges, misappropriates, or sells trust assets without the trustee's consent, that's you, will immediately forfeit their inheritance. Not only do they lose their share, but they could also face legal consequences. I sat there stunned. Forfeit their inheritance? My parents' $500,000, Brian's $500,000, all of it could vanish because of what they'd done. My grandfather's words echoed, "Your strength is your true asset." Was this his way of protecting me? So, if I can prove they forged or misappropriated the house, they lose everything? I asked, my voice trembling not from fear, but a strange mix of pain and satisfaction. Exactly, Mr. Harrison said. But we need evidence. Documents, contracts, signatures. Anything that proves they acted behind your back. If they forged your signature or used illegal means, we can not only recover the property, but also activate that forfeiture clause. He paused. But you need to prepare yourself. This isn't just a legal matter. This is your family. Family? The word stabbed. My parents, who raised me, had become betrayers. Brian, the brother I'd once hoped would grow up, was part of this scheme. My eyes stung, but I refused to let tears fall. I understand, Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. What do I do next? He placed a hand on my shoulder, just like my grandfather used to. Gather evidence. Find out how they sold the house, who bought it, how the paperwork was signed. If there's any sign of forgery, notarizations, anything, we'll have grounds to act. I'll support you every step of the way. But you have to be strong, Garrett. This won't be easy. I nodded. A surge of determination, stronger than ever before, rose within me. My craftsman house, the rose garden for my grandmother, the nights I'd worked to build my life, they had taken it all. But I wouldn't let them win. I'll find the evidence, I said, my voice firm. And I'll take back what's mine. Leaving Mr. Harrison's office, I felt like I was stepping into battle. The Pasadena sun still shone, but inside me was a storm. I pulled out my phone and texted David. You were right. There's a protective clause. I'll need your help. I didn't know exactly where to start, but I knew I wouldn't stop until the truth was exposed. My parents, Brian, they thought I'd just stay silent, accept the loss. They didn't know I was Norman Miller's grandson. My will now was an unquenchable fire. I decided to start at the most painful place, my craftsman house. I needed to see Ellen and George again, to dig deeper. Last time, all I knew was that my parents sold it. Now, I needed details. Who met with them? What was the exact paperwork? In the taxi, I clenched my fists, suppressing the feeling that my heart was being crushed. The house appeared, its familiar stained glass windows, the rose garden now unevenly trimmed, like an unhealed wound. I knocked, heart pounding. Ellen opened it, her friendly smile now tinged with worry. "Garrett, you're back," she said, her voice soft, sensing I wasn't there just to say hello. "Come in." Inside, George was sitting, a newspaper in hand, his eyes fixed on me, wary. "Mr. Garrett," he said, "what's new? Last time you mentioned something. We're still not sure what's going on." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm, but my determination shone through. "Ellen, George, I'm sorry to bother you again, but I need to know more about the sale. I believe my parents forged documents to sell this house. I need evidence to take back what's mine." Ellen and George exchanged a look. Then she stood and retrieved a stack of papers. "We don't want to be caught up in any trouble," Ellen said, her voice low. Your parents and your brother, said you were moving abroad and needed to sell quickly. They brought a deed of transfer with your signature and notarized documents. We paid in cash, and everything was finalized in a few days." I held the papers, my heart racing. The sale contract was in my father's name, Robert Miller, and there it was, a signature purportedly mine on the deed. But it wasn't mine. It was close, very close, but there were shaky, uneven strokes, like someone trying to mimic it. "This isn't my signature," I whispered, my voice catching. George frowned. They also provided a notarized document confirming everything was legal. We had no reason to suspect otherwise. I asked to photograph the documents, feeling like I'd found the first piece of the puzzle. Ellen looked at me, full of concern. "If you're telling the truth, we're victims too. We paid for the house. If something's wrong, we need to know." I nodded, promising to follow up. Leaving the house, I felt a mix of relief and simmering anger. My parents had forged my signature. But I needed more evidence. Back at the temporary rental, I contacted David again. He agreed to help analyze the documents and suggested checking my parents' house. If they took original documents from your house, they might still have them. The thought of returning there made me shudder, but I had no choice. I went to my parents' house one morning, knowing they'd be out shopping. I slipped inside and quietly opened their filing cabinet. Inside, stacks of bills, contracts, insurance papers. My heart raced when I found a folder labeled Garrett's house. It was a treasure trove. Copies of the deed of transfer, notarized documents, and handwritten notes. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, numbers, dates, and a chilling note that read, "All cash offer, quick and clean." But what truly chilled me was the notarized document. The notary was listed as John Thompson, but the signature looked sloppy, unprofessional. I photographed everything, put it all back, and left before they returned. I had nearly enough evidence, but I wanted to understand Brian's role. He wasn't just a beneficiary. He might have been part of the plan. I went back to his Instagram. One photo showed him with an unfamiliar man, both in front of a real estate office. I zoomed in, recognized the logo. A lead. I visited the office, posing as a potential home buyer. The agent, Avery, was eager to assist. I subtly steered the conversation to my Craftsman house. She nodded. Oh, the house on Oak Street. That was a quick deal. The seller was Brian Miller, who said his brother was moving abroad and needed to sell fast. We found a cash buyer right away. I kept my expression neutral, though rage boiled inside. Brian handled everything himself? Avery nodded. He brought all the paperwork, including his brother's signature and notarized documents. We had no reason to doubt it. I left, reeling. Brian didn't just know, he executed it. My father forged the notarization. My mother forged my signature. And Brian handled the transaction. They had worked together, perfectly, to steal everything from me. But they made a critical mistake. They didn't know the house was tied to the trust. And I had Mr. Harrison. I contacted Mr. Harrison again, sending him all the evidence. The forged deed, the questionable notarized document, the real estate agent's confirmation. He reviewed it. His voice over the phone was calm but resolute. Garrett, this is strong evidence. A forged signature and notarization are serious legal violations. We can file a lawsuit to reclaim the house and the forfeiture clause will be activated. But you need to be certain about this. Once we proceed, your family will never be the same. I fell silent, thinking of my parents, of Brian, of the family dinners that were now just memories. They destroyed our family first, Mr. Harrison, I said. I'm just taking back what's mine. He agreed, promising to prepare the legal documents. Stay calm, Garrett. We'll do this the right way. When I hung up, I looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't the Garrett who believed his family would never betray him. I was someone new, forged by pain and determination. My grandfather, my rose garden, my Craftsman house. I would take it all back. I had enough evidence, yes. But a lawsuit wasn't enough. I wanted my parents and Brian to face the truth in front of the entire family. In front of the relatives who had watched me grow up, who had heard my parents boast about their golden boy. I wanted them to see the consequences of their actions, not through a cold legal letter, but in person, in a moment they couldn't escape. I called Aunt Susan, my mother's older sister. She was always fair, always straightforward, the only one who ever praised my efforts, who said Grandpa would be proud. Aunt Susan, I said, keeping my emotions in check. I want to organize a family gathering. Invite everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins. I have something important to say. She hesitated, sensing the gravity in my voice. Garrett, is something wrong? I need everyone there, I replied. I'll explain later. I borrowed Aunt Susan's house for a weekend, telling her it was a family update after my trip. I didn't reveal the details, but told my mother I wanted to make peace after recent tensions. My mother, perhaps out of guilt or confidence that I'd just accept the loss of my house, agreed immediately. That's good, Garrett, she said, relieved. The family needs to come together. Brian will be happy to see his big brother. I clenched my jaw, suppressing my anger. They didn't know this gathering wasn't about reconciliation. It was about exposing the truth. I invited Mr. Harrison, telling him to come as a family friend, and he agreed, bringing the trust documents and all the evidence I'd collected. Are you sure you want to do this in front of the whole family, Garrett? He asked. This will be a big shock. They chose this path, Mr. Harrison, I replied. I'm just helping them see where it leads. On the day, I arrived at Aunt Susan's early. Garrett, are you okay? She asked, worried. You seem different. I gave her a strange smile. I'm fine, Aunt Susan. Today's an important day. Family members started arriving. Laughter and hugs filled the air, as if this were just a normal gathering, but my heart was pounding like a warrior preparing for battle. My parents arrived, Dad in his new shirt, Mom in a light blue dress, her smile forced but confident. Brian showed up late, strutting in with his usual smug demeanor, wearing a white linen shirt like the one from his Maldives photos. He clapped me on the shoulder. Big bro, you're back. How was Europe? Don't be mad about the house thing. Life's too long for that. I looked into his arrogant eyes, untainted by remorse. I just nodded. Yeah, Brian, life's long. Once everyone was settled around the tables in the backyard, I stood up, holding a glass of wine, but not drinking. The lively chatter quieted, all eyes turning to me. Thank you all for coming today, I began, my voice calm but resonant. I just returned from 6 weeks in Europe. But today, I don't want to talk about work. I want to talk about family, about truth, trust, and what we do to each other. My mother looked at me, a flicker of worry in her eyes. My father crossed his arms, frowning. Brian smirked, expecting an apology or reconciliation. I set the wine glass down and pulled a stack of papers from my bag, copies of the deed, the forged notarized document, photos from the real estate agency. When I went on my trip, I asked my parents to look after my Craftsman house. I continued, my voice slow and icy. The house I bought with my sweat, tears, and part of the funds from Grandpa Norman's trust. But when I returned, I found out my parents sold it without asking me. Murmurs rippled around the table. Aunt Susan gasped, covering her mouth. Cousins exchanged confused glances. My mother stood up, her voice trembling. Garrett, what are you doing? This isn't the place for this. I raised a hand, gesturing for her to sit. No, Mom. This is exactly the place. Everyone needs to know the truth. I held up the papers. This is the deed of transfer for the house. It has my signature, but I didn't sign it. This is a notarized document signed by someone named John H. Thompson, but the signature is fake. And this, I pulled out my phone, showing the photo of Brian in front of the real estate office, is proof that Brian facilitated the sale, lying that I was moving abroad for work. The air grew heavy. Brian's face paled, and he forced a laugh. What? What are you making up, Garrett? Don't blow this out of proportion. I locked eyes with him, all my pain and anger surging. Making it up? Let Mr. Harrison explain. I gestured to Mr. Harrison, who had been sitting quietly. He stood, holding the trust documents, his voice low but commanding. I am the attorney managing the Norman Miller Trust, he began. The Craftsman house belongs to the trust, with Garrett as the sole trustee. Selling it without his consent was illegal. But more critically, the trust has a clear clause. Anyone who forges, misappropriates, or sells trust assets without the trustee's consent will immediately forfeit their inheritance. Gasps echoed. My mother covered her face. My father sat frozen, his hands trembling. Brian slammed the table. What? What are you talking about? It's just an old house. Mr. Harrison looked at him, his voice cold. Not just the house, Mr. Brian. You and your parents have forfeited $500,000 each from the trust, a total of $1 million, plus the vacation cabin in Big Bear. Furthermore, forging signatures and notarizations is a criminal offense. You will face legal consequences. Silence fell, broken only by the soft rustle of the wind. My mother clutched her face, stifling sobs. My father approached Mr. Harrison, demanding to see the trust documents. Brian slammed the table again, yelling what? Grandpa had that much money and left it all to Garrett. Why didn't anyone tell me? He turned to me, eyes bloodshot. Garrett, you knew about this and said nothing. How selfish are you? I looked at Brian, feeling like I was staring at a spoiled child. Selfish. I replied, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. I worked my whole life to prove I was worthy of Grandpa's trust. You, Brian, only took handouts from Mom and Dad, living off deceit. Grandpa put me in charge of the trust because he believed I'd use it wisely. And now you've all stripped yourselves of your own inheritance. My mother rushed to me, grabbing my hand, tears streaming. Garrett, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about the trust. I just wanted to help Brian. You're his big brother. You can forgive us, right? You can share the inheritance as planned. My father joined in, his voice hoarse. Garrett, we're family. You can't let us lose everything like this. Think it over. Brian, almost pleading, jumped in. Big bro, please think it over. $2 million in inheritance isn't small. I looked at them. My mother with tear-filled eyes. My father, defeated. Brian, with his childish anger. Part of me wanted to forgive, to hug my mother and say it would be okay. But then I remembered my rose garden, my Craftsman house, and my grandfather's words, your strength is your true asset. They had chosen to betray me. Chosen Brian over justice. You're not my family, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Family doesn't steal each other's dreams. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My father held her, unable to meet my eyes. Brian stormed out, muttering curses. The other family members looked at me. Some nodded. Others quietly left. Aunt Susan came to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Garrett, she said. Your grandfather would be proud. As everyone left, I stood in the backyard, watching the sunset paint the Pasadena sky golden. Mr. Harrison patted my shoulder. You did what you had to, he said. The legal documents are ready. We'll reclaim your house, and they'll pay the price. I nodded, but inside, there was no victory. just an emptiness where my love for my family once was. In the days following the gathering, I felt like I was in a whirlwind. Mr. Harrison's legal team sprang into action, filing a lawsuit in Pasadena court with serious charges: forged signatures, fraudulent notarization, misappropriation of trust assets. I spent hours in his office, reviewing every document, every piece of evidence. Each one was a knife, reminding me of the betrayal, but also a step toward justice. The police moved quickly. One morning, Mr. Harrison called. "Garrett, they've opened a criminal investigation. Your parents and Brian have been summoned for questioning." I sat down, my hands trembling. Images of my mother sobbing, my father bowed, Brian storming off. I didn't want them to go to jail, but I couldn't let them escape the consequences. "What will they be charged with?" I asked. Mr. Harrison's tone was steady. "Your parents face charges of forgery and fraud. Brian is being charged with complicity and profiting from criminal proceeds. We have solid evidence, Garrett." I nodded. "What about my house?" "We're working with Ellen and George. They're victims, too. The court may void the sale and refund their money. You'll get your house back, but it will take a few months." I hung up, staring out the window. The Pasadena sunlight was radiant, but it no longer felt warm. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The officer, a stern, middle-aged man, took meticulous notes. "We've checked the notarized document," he said. "The person listed as John H. Thompson doesn't exist in the notary registry. The signature on the deed has also been confirmed as forged through handwriting analysis." A jolt ran through me. "What does that mean?" I asked. The officer looked at me, his voice calm but firm. "Your parents will be charged with forgery and fraud. They could face probation and restitution. Your brother, Brian, will be charged with complicity, and he'll have to repay all the money he used from the house sale, including the costs of his Maldives trip." I left the police station reeling. Probation, restitution, repayment. The words echoed like a grim song. I didn't want my family destroyed, but I couldn't forgive them either. They had chosen this path. Chosen to steal my dream, to feed Brian's laziness. I thought of my grandfather, his words, "Your strength is your true asset." He was right. My strength wasn't in the house. It was in my determination to seek justice. In the weeks that followed, my family unraveled. My parents were formally charged, receiving 3 years of probation and a substantial restitution order, mostly the money they'd gained from selling my house. They were forced to mortgage their Pasadena home, the house I grew up in, to cover the debt. Aunt Susan told me my mother cried every night, while my father barely spoke, sitting silently in front of the TV. Brian faced harsher consequences. The court ordered him to repay the full cost of his Maldives trip, over $20,000, and fined him for complicity. With no more financial support from our parents and no trust fund, Brian was left to face reality. No job, no home, and massive debt. I saw him once, passing a coffee shop in downtown Pasadena. He was sitting there, crumpled t-shirt, eyes shadowed, talking on the phone about job applications. When he saw me, he turned away, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't stop. I had nothing left to say to him. After 5 long months, Mr. Harrison called. The court had voided the sale of the Craftsman house. Ellen and George were refunded, and the house was officially returned to my name. The day I received the keys, I stood in front of it, a mix of joy and sorrow washing over me. The stained glass windows were still there, but the rose garden had withered from neglect. I stepped inside. The familiar smell of wood filled my senses, but it wasn't the same. The house had once been my dream, but now it carried the scars of betrayal. I spent days cleaning, restoring, trying to bring back its old beauty. But every crack in the wall, every brick in the fireplace, reminded me of what I'd lost. Not just property, but my trust in my family. I stood in the backyard, looking at the wilted rose bushes, wondering if I could revive them. Or if I could revive myself. My family was no longer what it was. Aunt Susan stayed in touch, but other relatives drifted away. A few cousins called, offering sympathy, but no one mentioned the gathering. My parents tried to reach out, leaving voicemails filled with apologies, but I didn't respond. It wasn't that I didn't want to forgive, it was that I wasn't ready. Maybe one day I'd sit down with them, but not now. Brian disappeared from my radar. I heard he'd moved to another city, working odd jobs to pay off his debt. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part reminded me he'd chosen this path. He could have grown up, stood on his own, but instead, he chose deceit. I sat on the porch of my Craftsman house, a cold cup of coffee in my hand. The house was mine again, but it wasn't the place I'd once dreamed of. It was a trophy, a testament to my will, but also a reminder of the cost of justice. I thought of my grandfather, the trust, how he'd protected me even after he was gone. I wondered if he knew that one day, I'd need the strength he'd instilled in me. I stood up, walked to the backyard, and began pulling weeds, watering the surviving rose bushes. Maybe they'd bloom again. Maybe not. But I would try, as I always had. Justice had been served, but my journey wasn't over. I would rebuild, not just the house, but my life, one step at a time. While restoring the house, I started thinking about the trust fund. The $1 million I would receive when I turned 35, now just a few months away. My parents and Brian had forfeited their inheritance, and that $1.5 million, along with the vacation cabin in Big Bear, now belonged to me. But I didn't want to keep it all. My grandfather had taught me that true wealth isn't in money, but in what you leave behind for the world. So, I decided to establish the Norman Miller Foundation, a scholarship fund for young people who, like me years ago, worked tirelessly, counting every penny to pursue their dreams. I used a portion of the trust fund to launch it, providing tuition assistance for students facing financial hardship but with strong determination. As I signed the paperwork in Mr. Harrison's office, I felt my grandfather's presence, as if he were there, smiling at me. "Well done, Garrett," I imagined him saying. "This is true strength." The scholarship fund quickly gained attention. Local Pasadena newspapers ran stories, calling me the man who turned pain into hope. I didn't care for the spotlight, but I was proud when I received thank you letters from students. One girl wrote, "Thank you, Garrett. Because of your scholarship, I can continue college and become a doctor." Reading those words, I felt that my craftsman house, my rose garden, even my scars, had meaning. My family became a distant memory. I heard they moved to a small apartment in the suburbs, living quietly. My mother once sent me a handwritten letter, her shaky handwriting filled with remorse. "Garrett, I'm sorry. I only wanted to help Brian, but I was wrong. If you can forgive me, I'm willing to do anything." I read it, left it on the table for days, but didn't respond. It wasn't that I didn't want to forgive, it was that I didn't know how to mend what had been shattered. Brian, I heard, was living alone, withdrawn, seeming to have changed after the shock of losing his inheritance. I didn't know if he was truly remorseful, but I hoped for his own sake that one day he would find his path. One afternoon, I sat on the porch of my craftsman house, a hot cup of coffee in hand, gazing at the rose garden, now blooming vibrantly again. The red petals glowed under the sunlight, a reminder that life could be revived even after the deepest wounds. This house, once a symbol of my dream, was now a symbol of resilience. I had lost my family, but I had found the strength my grandfather always believed I possessed. I reflected on my journey, from the shock of discovering my house had been sold, to the quiet days of investigation, to the moment I confronted my parents and Brian in front of the family. In America, forging signatures to steal property isn't uncommon. And the most painful part is that it can come from those closest to you. But my story is proof that justice and truth always find a way to prevail. My parents and Brian paid a price, not just in money, but in honor and trust. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't regret standing up for myself. I stood up, went inside, and took an old framed photo of my grandfather, placing it on the fireplace. He was smiling in the picture, his eyes bright, as if he knew I would overcome. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. Then I returned to the garden, picked up the watering can, and continued tending to the surviving rose bushes. My life, like this garden, would keep blooming. Not because I had everything, but because I never gave up.